had originally intended to make a longer video about all the different types of health concerns we might have while traveling through India, but then I realized that the vaccinations themselves are a pretty big topic, so I decided to devote this video to just the topic of vaccinations. So of course, we're going to start off with the biggie, COVID vaccinations. First of all, we require all of our students to be fully boosted, fully vaccinated before traveling. They actually have to literally present to us a scan or a photo of their vaccination card, which we keep on record. They also have to bring it along with us. It makes traveling through India a lot easier. The reason we did not hold our program last year or 2 years ago was that we could not travel to India because of COVID. So in January of 2020, that was the last time we actually went to India. In January of 2021, the country was closed. There was no getting in to India or getting around. That was per the Health Ministry of India, indicating that that was what they wanted. They did not want tourists to come to their country for that particular year. By October of 2021, the country had started to open up a little bit. I believe it was October 15th of 2021, they began to allow tourists to enter. But the restrictions were still, in my opinion, pretty heavy. I'm not remembering what they all were at the time, but it made me a little bit nervous about actually getting there. What I was considering doing, because especially since I had some students who had been on my list for a couple of years and were about to graduate and I knew they really, really wanted to go, I was considering doing a modified version of our program where we only stayed in Delhi and we just found things to do and different neighborhoods to explore in Delhi itself. However, the risk was pretty high that somebody was going to end up quarantined, frankly. And, the Indian government was testing heavily, and the fact that it was still spreading quite a bit was just not, in my opinion, worth it at the time. The actual restrictions to come into the country were still, in my opinion, heavy enough that it wouldn't have necessarily been worth it to have students take the chance that they would actually be able to enter the country and stay for 15 days. It seemed likely that at least 1 or 2 people would be caught out and have to quarantine and would miss the whole thing, and it would be a complete waste of their money and time. So one of the issues was they were requiring RT-PCR tests within 72 hours. Within 72 hours of flight, they were requiring you to take an RT-PCR test. At the time, we could get the tests, but you'd have to make the appointment at least 24 hours ahead of time, and then the results would take like 24 hours, but sometimes 48 hours or more, and so you'd actually have to do multiple tests if you really wanted to make sure. It seemed so stressful to do that, even from the United States where we knew the system pretty well. How were we going to get RT-PCR tests once we were in India? So now, these days, this year, the new system is you do have to still do the RT-PCR tests, but if you can show a COVID card, show an official card saying that you've gotten the vaccinations and that you're up to date, that is acceptable. So that's new this year. Last year, it was still, you had to show a negative test. But this year, you can show a negative test or you can show a vaccination card. So this year, of course, all of the students going with our group are going to have vaccination cards. That is the one thing I told them, you must absolutely have your card with you, a paper, like the hard copy of your vaccination card with you, because that is an essential way. It's basically your key towards getting around India without having to take all the tests and so on. So we were pretty determined to go this year. We are going in January of 2023. Finally, we are back. Everything is planned. We're now about, just over 30 days out from our travel start. So my first priority is simply getting everybody into the country in the first place. So like I said, our college, Carthage, our study abroad program, is requiring everybody to be completely vaccinated for COVID and present their card. And just recently, I think in the last month or so, the US government has released more COVID boosters. I just got my most recent booster, so now I am fully up to date as of about 4 weeks to go before the trip, so this was pretty good timing. This time around, by the way, my COVID booster did not make me sick at all. I took a good dose of Tylenol before I left the house, And then in the past, my COVID boosters have made me miserable for about 36 hours. So I was really happy that this time that didn't happen. And I am asking all my students to go ahead and get their boosters as well. They're pretty easy to come by at the moment. So yeah, go out to Walgreens and get those boosters. Even if they are fully vaccinated, it's still possible, of course, to contract the virus. As somebody flies into Delhi, walks through the Delhi airport, that they might have a slightly elevated temperature and that they're going to be pulled out of line and tested, and they're going to test positive. If they have any virus in their system, the long travel day is likely to wear them down to the point where they're not fighting things off as well as they might. And so if they have a virus, it's actually kind of likely that the immune system would be knocked down to the point where they might be symptomatic by the time they land. So if somebody tests positive just before leaving, we're not requiring them to test themselves, but we are going to be bringing COVID tests to the airport. We are not qualified to look at somebody's COVID test and say, no, you cannot do anything, but we are asking students to make good choices. So with my insurance, I was able to get 4 of these boxes of 2 tests, so I have 8. I'm going to see if either Dave can use his insurance or I can just get another set next month. In December. It's November right now, so I think in December it might renew, so I might be able to get 8 more tests. So according to the website here for the Binax Now, which is the one that wasn't covered by our insurance, it is the Binax Now COVID-19 Egg Card Home Test correctly identified 81.6% of positive specimens and 98.3% of negative specimens. Pretty accurate. I know that home COVID tests are not the most accurate way to go, but at the same time, I don't really want to put it on the students to go out and find an RT-PCR test to go with. And I'm asking students to make smart choices. If they do test positive, even if they don't feel symptomatic, it's possible that the long journey might wear down their system enough that they might start to show symptoms once they land. And if there's any possibility that they may have been exposed, for example, through holiday parties or through working at healthcare facilities through the holidays and being exposed to COVID positive patients, then they should make a smart decision and probably not go. We have asked them to purchase CFAR insurance so that should be able to get their full dollars back on the program if they cannot in fact fly. I know it would be heartbreaking to not go while you're still literally standing in the airport and everybody's getting ready, but just it's the smart choice to make. The reality is, if you land in India right now, they say that they're pulling 2% of people out of line and testing them randomly. And also, of course, if you're symptomatic in any way, such as an elevated temperature, they will be pulling you out of line and testing you. If you test positive, you have to quarantine. I think it's for 8 days right now. That's almost the entire trip. And you can't just fly back home. You actually do have to quarantine. They won't let you, mingle. And so the goal is to get everybody through the airport and then out of the airport and to our hotel. That is my biggest goal at the moment. We're just going to have to deal with the situations as they arise. We are going to be going to some crowded areas. I will be masking, not just for protection from viruses, but also from protection from all of the particles in the air. So I'm hoping that some of the students will also be masking for those reasons and might serve as a little bit of extra protection. But nonetheless, there is only so much you can do to protect yourself when you're going through crowded areas in India. So the first time that we went to India, we got a certain list of vaccinations. We were sorting through many, many different lists, and there are all kinds of things that you can get vaccinated for: dengue fever, yellow fever, and I don't think these things are particularly prevalent in India, but typhoid actually is. So the recommendations that we finally came up with, and this is just our opinion and the list that we have compiled for our students, and they are welcome to get any of these or none of these or much more than these, it's fine. We get Hep A and Hep B and typhoid. Now the Hep A required boosters. I believe it needed a booster 1 month later and then another booster at least 6 months later. And I think you're good for that for a while. Hep B, once you get the Hep B vaccination, you're good for about 30 years. Now the typhoid fever vaccination, you have to kind of look into what you want to do and how long you want to be protected. So if you take the oral typhoid vaccine, then you're good for 5 years, and then you have to get boosted after 5 years. However, The oral medication does have a tendency to make people feel pretty sick, almost like they have typhoid fever for several hours. And Dave got the oral, and sure enough, he was writhing on the bed and just sick and in pain for hours. Nonetheless, he says when it's time for him to get boosted, he's actually going to go ahead and do the oral again. I did the typhoid shot. Now, the typhoid shot is the typhoid vaccination that is a shot is only good for 2 years. However, I had no real symptoms other than a sore arm. It was pretty darn sore. I had never had a reaction against a vaccination like that. My arm was very sore. It was so sore that it actually kept me up that night. So that is something to consider. You may have a reaction against the typhoid vaccination. I also had to get a typhoid booster. That was a little tricky this time around. It turns out, well, we use Walgreens, and I'm going to say that we've always been very happy with Walgreens. Getting the typhoid vaccination or getting the typhoid booster, you just have to be careful because you'll go in and you'll be scheduling, for example, myself, I wanted to schedule my COVID booster and my typhoid booster at the same time. And actually, you can go into the Walgreens website and you can scroll down and you'll be able to, if you select more, you'll actually be able to see a whole list of kind of exotic vaccinations. And if you select typhoid, apparently it seems like you're scheduling that, but it turns out this happened twice when I was actually literally in the store. I had scheduled it, well, I had called ahead. They said, no, you have to schedule through the website. So I went to the website, I scheduled it. When I showed up, they said, no, we don't have the typhoid vaccine, it turns out. So my suggestion would be go ahead and schedule it through the website, but then just call the store and confirm that they have it in stock, because otherwise you might be wasting your time. I did find a Walgreens that had the typhoid vaccine. The Walgreens system is a little bit, like the website is not exactly up to date, obviously, because twice I scheduled this thing and it turns out they didn't have it. So the website itself is not entirely up to date, but I will say the pharmacy technicians have been amazing. The farm techs that they have at Walgreens, every single one of them has been, they've been really, really busy, and yet they took the time to answer my questions, and they were really nice, understanding the situation, listening to me, calling around and making sure that I wasn't wasting any further time, and then helping me out. Now, it seems to me the first time I got the typhoid vaccination, I feel like my insurance covered it. This time it cost me, I think it was $89. It was not covered by my insurance at all. The booster was not covered, so that's something to think about too. I feel like all of my vaccinations and boosters have been covered by my insurance at Walgreens, other than this typhoid booster that I got. And also, once again, I got the typhoid shot rather than the oral medication, so the typhoid booster made my arm sore. I don't think it made me as sore as last time, but again, I took some Tylenol before heading out. Maybe there's something to that. I don't know, something to think about. And lastly, we've had several students through the years who have decided to get a treatment for malaria. I'm not actually sure how that works. We've never opted to do that. We traveled to India in January, where the mosquito infestation is not as great. We also do not go to areas where there are a high number of mosquitoes. We have, though, there are some times when we do see some mosquitoes. There's one restaurant that we eat at in Varanasi where we're sort of high up overlooking the city and it's open air, and we do get some mosquitoes then. But that was about the only time I really remember seeing or experiencing mosquitoes. So it's something we're going to watch out for in the future, but so far we have not gotten treatments for malaria. We have not gotten protection against malaria, and we're going to probably stick with that for now. As a final list, the vaccinations that we have acquired when traveling to India are COVID, of course, Hep A, Hep B, and typhoid, with the option of malaria if that is something that your physician recommends. But of course, I am not your physician. I am not a physician at all. So you want to make sure that you're going with whatever your physician recommends. We have had students who have gone ahead and gotten protection against a number of other possible illnesses that might happen. I will also say the timing of these usually should be about a month out or more from the actual start of the trip. As I was running around trying to get my typhoid booster, I was thinking about that. I'm thinking, time is ticking down. I really need to figure this out. But thankfully, I was able to get everything done. And now I feel fully protected, ready to go. I've got my boosters. Everything is set. And also, probably the most controversial aspect of this is that we are not planning on having any kind of traditional holiday celebrations. We've also recommended to our students to try to avoid crowds during the holidays. That is a heavy, heavy ask. Certain people in our family were totally okay with that. We just sort of rearranged the schedule. We are stipulating 10 days prior to the start of the trip. We are not going to be seeing hardly anybody at all. To a certain extent, I'm even going to be protecting myself against our own children. It's just it's not really worth any kind of exposure, because if I cannot go on the trip, I believe the entire thing has to actually be canceled. So I'm trying to be extremely careful. So the 3 events that are going to be most difficult is Christmas Day itself. Actually, we do have family members who are having their traditional family celebration. It's a fairly large number of people, something like 20 people. I don't think it's worth it for me to go. I don't believe Dave is going to go either. I think our children might go to that if we can get somebody to come pick them up and drop them off. 2 other events that are going to be a little tricky. We have one child who's having a holiday choir concert. We have another child who's having a holiday band concert. And we're probably not going to go to the choir concert, but we probably are going to go to the band concert. And I'm going to wear a mask and I'm going to stand off to the side, because basically it's sitting amongst a whole bunch of other parents on these bleachers, and pretty much nobody wears masks anymore. I'm just going to really have to insist, and I'm probably going to have some battles on my hands for certain things. But it's very, very important that I am free of the virus before we begin travel. So I'm going to do my very utmost best to make sure that I'm protecting myself, even if it makes things weird socially. Well, those are the kind of choices we've gotten used to making over the last 3 years. So I'm going to do my best to stand strong, wear masks, protect myself, avoid crowds, and get myself as healthy as possible before we go. So those are our choices. Those are the kinds of vaccinations that we have, that we've engaged with. Wish us luck. I hope we all make it there, healthy and strong.